Welcome back to the main stage. We've got a really great session that's going to be coming up with Will and Brandt. And if we could ask everybody to please put on your headsets. They're sponsored by Silent Conference. And if you want to switch to Spanish, hit the little white button once. Don't hold it down too hard. And the simultaneous AI translation will be going on in Spanish. And you'll know because the headset turns yellow from blue. With that, we really want to thank our headline sponsor, Hotel Map, for sponsoring. And you can go ahead and ask questions through the Poll Everywhere app. There's a QR code, or we'll be going around and pass the mic for those that have questions. And with that, we'll kick it off. Thanks, guys.
Turn it back on.
All right, y'all ready to get this started?
This is going to be a fire hose because I was sitting watching some of the other sessions and 45 minutes goes really fast.
And Brandt and I talk like a mile a minute, so we're going to try to cram as much AI knowledge in as fast as possible. So some baseline rules for today's talk. First of all, we're not going to just like talk about AI in like a hypothetical, this is where
High
it could
in the
be.
sky, someday maybe.
But instead, we're going to talk about how you actually use it. So this is going to be great for a lot of people who aren't aware of a lot of the things that we're going to talk about on how you can actually apply this today. And then we'll also sprinkle in some like, imagine this is where it can go, but we're going to make this as tactical as possible. Second rule, we have a rule when it comes to AI. It's not that AI is going to take your job, but instead,
People who know how to use AI are going to take your job. Right? So let's just be real clear about that. These are not things like event planners, event folks, we're good for a while. But be aware, there are people that are learning how to use these tools to infinitely speed up their processes. They will be the first to come back with RFP. They will be the first to come back with set designs. They will be the first to come back with speaking proposals and things like that. So it's not that AI is going to take your jobs. It's people who know how to use AI are going to be the ones that take people's jobs.
so raise your hand if you're ready to take someone's job by using AI. You're in the right place. So what this means is that we're going to do things like, for example, generating faster creative, generating faster responses to RFPs.
Yeah.
It means less need of an entire team to do this activity, but instead a team of one.
Yeah.
Or in this case, a team of two.
Yeah, so most of the AI that we're talking about right now is called generative AI. Everyone's heard this term at this point?
Yeah?
A lot of
Hands up
nodding
if you heard
heads.
generative
Okay, all right.
AI. Okay,
Anyone's
it's on
still
the
a little
title.
fuzzy? Anyone's still a little fuzzy about what that means? All right, cool. Then we won't go into a deep discussion about what generative AI is. But for the most part, these are the tools that are creating out of whole cloth, whether it's text or images or now audio, and we're going to be showing you some of these things as we go. Generative AI are these things that are doing. So how can you use generative AI? Things like ChatGPT, things like Midjourney and the image generators. The biggest thing that I see for creatives is using it to overcome the blank page syndrome, right? You got to get that proposal out, and then you just stare at the blank page with the blinking cursor. And you're
Who
like,
submitted an RFP at 11:59, you know?
Right? So overcoming that blank page, this is how I'm using that in my own work, is when I have to write a session description for a thing that I'm going to be giving a talk on.
Let's say to talk about generative AI at Event Tech
Throwing
Live.
it up. So literally the session description for this session was written with generative AI. Now, what you don't do is copy that and paste it. You still got to run it through this processing unit, right? And make sure that it makes sense. So things like session descriptions, things like just generating session ideas. Like, hey, I want to do a session on AI. What are 3 different takes that I might not have thought of? Literally typing that in as your prompt, and you'll be surprised what comes back. So I'm frequently astonished when it comes to just even the text-based stuff, how helpful it can be to just overcoming that blank page. I would never use it to write an article, but I have asked it to write an article, and then I kind of skim through it and go, well, okay, I actually kind of like that turn of phrase, or I like that structure that it generated. I'm going to use that structure, and then again, I'm not starting from a blank page. I'm using it to overcome that hurdle.
So one way that you can also utilize this is as a subject matter expert, right? A lot of times there's a lot of knowledge built into an organization, and you rely on people who have that specific subject matter expert. I actually get to call out my boss who's in the audience for the first time. By the way, first time I ever had a boss, so I get to say that for the first time on stage. But he said to me, when I first started, he said, you know what we should do? We should train an AI on everything that Click does. Click is the technology that Bizzabo has with the smart badges. If you have never heard of this, please come by and see it and get your mind blown. But we have a challenge within our organization that it's a very technical tool that has a lot of possibilities. We have a lot of times where we have to generate blog posts and social media posts. So if Brandt, you want to bring up my screen real quick, we said we were going to make this tactical. I built what's called a GPT. Has anyone built a GPT yet inside of ChatGPT? Put your hand up in the air. Okay, only a couple of you. For the rest of you, this is going to blow your mind. You can build your own custom chatbot. And as easy as just giving it a bunch of PDFs and literally writing it instructions. So I wrote instructions that said, I want you to be a pro when it comes to Click by Bizzabo. And this is helpful for me. I'm actually the subject matter expert that everyone comes to. But I wanted to make it easier for the whole organization to get the same answers that I have in my mind. I also wanted to have a partner in crime, again, reducing the team, where I can, ideate, create things like ebooks or session descriptions. And so what I did is I trained it on everything related to Click. Now, let's ask it a really complicated question. So I'm going to ask for some help from my colleagues in the back. What's a technical Click question that it might know the answer to? So ask, what would be a question you'd ask it? What's the difference between passive and active tracking? Let's make this bigger for you all too. The difference between passive and active tracking. This is a very technical thing. How many people work for event technology companies, right? You have so much technical knowledge. And it's literally going to explain this. So imagine instead of writing all that copy and, explain to the salesperson how to answer that question, instead the salespeople can come and ask the subject matter expert. This is extremely easy to do. All you need is the paid version of ChatGPT. You go in, you create a new GPT. You can find probably a YouTube tutorial on how to do this.
I'm going to bounce in real quick. Has anybody heard of the term hallucination when it comes to AI, right? So that's when AI gets goofy and gets wrong and does things that don't make sense. Now, when you're creating these custom GPTs, you can say only use this corpus, only use this bunch of data. Do not hallucinate. Do not pass go, do not make stuff up, so you can actually be very confident that the answers that it's going to give back are accurate, because it's not checking the internet, it's not using its own training that it had in the past. So that's, if you're worried about that, I just wanted to make sure I jumped in on that.
And you can tell that this is using only the knowledge I trained it, because it's very specific in how it's describing the idea of passive versus active. It's not just pulling from the internet like what the term active tracking means or passive tracking. Instead, it's pulling from the knowledge I've given it.
Yeah, so I want to give just a couple more quick examples of this kind of thing. We think about events, right? The giant books that we used to hand out with all of the information from the events, that's all now moved its way mostly online to event apps. Many fine event app vendors are here, so be sure and check those out. But what we're going to see more and more of are these chat type things embedded in these. We had chat bots back in the day, but all of that information kind of had to be manually inputted, and you had to kind of massage it a little bit for how it responded. Now it's very, very easy to, again, feed one of these things all of the information from your event, and then open it up through an API or something like that to be able to, for the attendees to be able to say, where are the bathrooms in the expo? And then it comes back there in the back corner, just follow the signs, something along those lines. So many of the things that we've had to rely on our volunteers for, extra staffing at booths, all of those kinds of things can be aided by the use of these chatbots. And then the last one I wanted to show before we move on from text-based things is actually our little podcast that we do, Fade to Black, there we go. I created a ChatGPT about a podcast, called it Podcast Producer. And so what I did is I fed it all of the descriptions from our 200 plus episodes of the podcast.
Real quick, by the way, how many people have subscribed to the Event Tech podcast?
Yay!
What? Now the rest of you should.
Shameless plug. Shameless plug. I fed it all of this because I'm doing all of this on the back end now. For a while we had a team that was doing it. Now I'm the one that's doing all of the editing and things like that. I don't have time to be writing all this stuff. So I now feed it the transcript. So if you look really closely, you'll see generate show notes for this episode. The only thing I wrote on the prompt was generate show notes for this episode that I fed it the actual transcript of, and it auto-generated then an episode summary, the highlights from the show, And then what I've been training this new version, the Podcast Producer 2.0, is actually to pull 3 or 4 quotes to be able to share it with your friends. So if you like the episode, here's 3 quotes. And it really is to the point where all I have to do is feed it the transcript. It generates all of this, and then I go in and tweak it. Right? Again, you don't cut and paste and just put it in. You've got to tweak it. We're seeing a lot of examples, unfortunately, of websites and things where in the website it'll say, this was generated by an LLM. If you, okay.
So I see this being a future where we are transcribing all of the session talks. For example, this session talk that's literally getting transcribed right now can take all that data, put it in, and we can start to generate social media posts. Highlights. We're going to get a little bit more about video and audio a little bit later, but imagine taking all that data and, again, repurposing it, which is a big deal for marketers. We used to spend hours repurposing content, and now you can do it in seconds.
Images. Should we move on?
Yes, this is one you're super stoked for because you guys use this all the time for your production work. So those who don't know, Brandt works for a production company doing AV and technical production and all those things like that. You use this literally to edit artwork.
Yeah, there's all kinds of great uses. I'm going to start with is just one of the things, again, we talked about was overcoming that blank page. And so when a client comes to you and says, yeah, I need some new ideas for some stage designs and things like that, that can take hours, days, weeks of rendering time, and you got to build it in Unreal Engine, and you got to do all this kind of stuff. But in just a matter of minutes, you can punch in a bunch of keywords. Think about, you guys use mood boards for your events. Think of this as like a digital mood board. So you're literally putting in words and phrases. So we've been experimenting with using these are AI-generated stage designs. Ranging from, giant things. It's amazing how well AI nails the average hotel ballroom. It's really quite freakishly good.
It's like they all look the same.
It's like they all look the same. So there's some, big giant ones. Let me go into some of these fun ones that I grabbed.
And again, like this used to cost thousands of dollars. I literally would pay CAD designers to do this. And now it's done in seconds.
So we had a client that was going to do an event on a rooftop, and they wanted it very green themed as part of that. So we just punched in a lot of those words. And these are not necessarily set designs you're going to use because here the audience is all potted plants. Right? But it gets your juices going, gets your mind going, and what you would be able to do and what we've been able to do is then go to the client and say, hey, these are crazy. They're AI generated. We're not lying about it. We're not saying we did anything weird about it. What do you like from these? Oh, I like how we've did this, little shrubbery and stuff that goes around that. You can pull elements from it, but you can also get great ideas for lighting. These were all banged out in an afternoon of just the same idea.
And again, so I think it's overcoming that blank page that makes it a lot easier. You used to have to spend hours designing the first draft. Now you can get the first draft kind of out of the way and have a very specific direction to go to.
I'm intentionally showing you how many of these we did in just a very short amount of time. But here's where I love it. Like, it's just generating, we typed in geometric designs, 3-dimensional space, things like that, and you start to get these things, you're like, oh, I kind of like that. Like, that's a cool thing. Maybe we can do something like that, those kinds of things. And that's what I'm really enjoying about it. Now, on the other one that I'll share real quick, is just more of a story. We got a question in the back too, so we'll come back.
By the way, questions, we have Poll Anywhere running. Ask questions throughout. We'll weave them into our topic. So don't wait until the end for questions.
Absolutely, throw them in. She was all
let's get the question in. And because we can't hear that well up here, I'm going to come back. Go ahead.
Come on over. Was that in ChatGPT that you did those renderings, or was it a different platform?
That was all Midjourney.
Midjourney? All right, there we go.
Yep.
Oh, we got another
one.
Yeah,
that's a great point. If we forget to call out how we're doing it, please do ask. Yeah, we got another gentleman right here.
We're going to get the creative people asking all the questions.
You mentioned that in your presentation, you said these are AI renderings. What was the reaction of your client? Did it cheapen the concept? Did it add a technical spin? Could you charge more? How did that work?
Hopefully charge more.
It's, like I say, think of it more like a mood board. We're like, hey, we weren't hiding anything. We said, here's a bunch of AI-generated things. What do you like from that? What don't you? And then we went into the process of actually sitting down with the designers and going, okay, how do we make this go? How close can we get to that? So I would say it's more about speeding up that initial process of the back and forth with the client so that you're not investing a ton of time and money into generating something only to have them be like, meh, what else you got? right? That kind of thing.
After a 40
Yeah.
hours of designing it, you
Right.
get, oh, I don't really like it. That's the worst feeling.
Right. And
Someone
I
asked, is this free to do? So Midjourney is not free. Not free?
Is free. There's most of these things have free tiers. They do then start to restrict you on what you can use it for. So for commercial purposes, right, they want you to be paying their paid plans. Midjourney is free to use, but if it gets busy, it slows down. So you're basically buying time on their servers to be able to move stuff up. I really like Midjourney. I personally stopped paying for it so that I could start experimenting with some of the other ones like DALL-E. So DALL-E might have been one that you heard of. That's the one that's built into OpenAI. So I like that because I can use ChatGPT and DALL-E basically for the same subscription price.
So continuing on down the line, you guys also used it for editing artwork. So back in the day when I also did production, customer comes to you and says, oh, I really like this slide, but I'd love it to be red. Okay, let me hit up the graphic designer. Oh, too bad we're on site. It's 2 a.m. You guys use it for artwork now, though.
Yeah, so that's the other wonderful story. And this is one that I didn't see coming, which is why I think this, we probably should have started with this, but I mean, this trend, this AI trend, is not like the metaverse. It's not like blockchain. It's not like the AI trend that happened before, because we had it, about 6 years ago. AI was the whole big thing. This is different. There's some there on this one, and here's one of the ones that opened my eyes. We're on, who here remembers the transition from 4.3 to 16.9, right? Yeah, fair amount. We're still dealing with that in a lot of places. So you get these PowerPoints, they're 4.3, and then you want to put them on these nice 16:9. It was a pain, right? You gotta, it gets all stretchy and weird. Similar now, we were doing a giant panoramic screen, and the client gave us a regular 16:9 PowerPoint, and we overlaid it. They're like, we just want it bigger. How do we get it bigger? And so we literally took some of the imagery that they had of like a shed on a farm, and we brought it into Adobe, whose Photoshop now has AI built in, and we said, expand the picture. And it extrapolated out and put in a field behind it, and then like the shed got a little bigger, and it put like dents in the shed where someone, I don't know, hit it with a rake or something like that. It was very, very realistic. The client didn't even notice that we'd done it. We just went, hey, look, it's bigger, and they went, yay, that's great. And they didn't notice that we had edited their image in any way, shape, or form. And that's come up several times now since we started playing with this. It's like, oh yeah, just bring it into Photoshop, use the zoom out feature, crop it to the size that you need it, and away it goes. And I have more examples of that in a different section later.
So that's really, amazing, powerful. For those who are curious what the tool is, Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Firefly, which is like, they're calling all their AI stuff Firefly, so you might also find some stuff about video. We'll talk about video in just a minute. But speaking of slide decks, let's show you guys some really quick ability to build a slide deck. So let's say, for example, I'm going to start let's bring up a whole new conversation. Let's say, for example, I'm giving a presentation on generative AI for an audience of event technology professionals, right? This is what you know. Give me an outline. For what to talk about. Believe it or not, we actually didn't use AI to come up with our outline. This was just bullet points, but it's going to build an outline. You guys have seen this before, right? So this is nothing new. We're going to let it keep kind of going, and hopefully it will give me only a couple points. We're probably not going to talk about ethical concerns on this talk, just FYI.
Not in this one.
Not on this one. Come on our podcast to learn that one. We're showing you case studies and real-world examples. Okay, Q&A. We're actually doing Q&A now. Now, this is what's really cool. Let's go ahead and take in the presentation bot. This was just one presentation bot I found, and I'm going to tell it, make me a slide deck for this presentation. And now it's going to use DALL-E to create images and the combination of using text to then do this. I'm going to give it access to the data, and it's going to generate a presentation. If you haven't seen this before, this is a great way to kind of get it started. I found out about this maybe like 3 months ago, so there's probably something even better out there. That's how fast this is moving. But you're going to see how very, very quickly, sometimes not quick enough, it is going to generate a slide. I think a slide or a slide deck for this.
In the meanwhile, there's another question that came up.
Great.
Yeah.
And it's, how many follow-up prompts are you typically using in Midjourney to refine the output that you want to show to the client?
Not a lot. It's more just like, as you start to get ideas of like, I liked that flowery thing that went around the edge, then you start incorporating that, and you're just kind of changing the prompt as you go. I personally haven't done a whole lot with follow-up prompts because it wasn't very good at the beginning, but they're starting to now work that in where you can be like, I don't like that part of it. Can you get rid of the bird in the corner? You know, that kind of thing. You're starting to be able to do more of that. Or bring the image that was generated by AI into Photoshop and then use Firefly to get rid of the bird in the corner or something like that.
Yeah, I found that Adobe's tools are very, very powerful in terms of like specificity.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do. But yeah, you guys can see it generated a really quick slide. Again, just one more example of how you can use image generation to start building a slide presentation. So, how many people have seen this before? Just curious. One or two. Okay, cool. They're gonna get mind blown by some of this other stuff then. Let's keep going down the line.
All right, moving on. So we've talked about chat, we've talked about images, of course. What is the next thing that we go to from there? But video. So just within the last few months, the video has started to get pretty crazy.
How many people have seen Sora? But we're hands high. Come on, engagement. There we go. 3 or 4 of you.
All right.
Okay, so how many people have then seen this bad boy? Let's see, did I do it
Yep,
right?
you're right. Yeah.
All right, so this was a video all generated completely from AI. Notice something important. First opening shot is of hands. How many people have seen weird hands inside of AI generation? It's really getting it. This is called Airhead. It's one of the examples of the video that Sora made. Completely AI generated. Amazing. So we're already there for where we've gone from text to images to now moving images.
Yeah. And like the image stuff, it doesn't hold up under deep scrutiny. You start pausing on some of this stuff and there's some weirdness. Like, you know, some of the people in the subway car had like triangle noses and things like that. But again, it's something that's pretty dang cool for being generated out of thin air.
No pun intended.
Right, exactly. And you know, a lot of this Sora stuff is not publicly accessible yet. They're just having people, they're seeding it to like creatives and things like that. But think about things like pre-visualization in movies or things along those lines, where again, you're just overcoming the blank page and getting something that's close enough that then you could shoot the movie from. Like this you could already take and use as a pre-visualization for a movie that you're gonna build about Airhead, the balloon guy.
It's mind-blowing. Imagine too that hype video you make for your conference to try to get everyone to come, how you hired a production company and paid them thousands of dollars to make that 1 minute long video that hopefully gets everyone to buy the registration. Now you can generate it using AI.
Oh yeah, I think about the number of times that I've seen a countdown video with thump, thump, thump music and things like that coming down. Those are the people who might be a little concerned about their jobs, are the people that generate countdown hype videos. But if you're a person who generates countdown hype videos, you'll be able to do it a lot faster. So again, the person's might be taking your job as the person who knows how to use these tools.
So that's Sora, that's OpenAI's model for video. Back to Adobe. Adobe sees the future of this, so they've now integrated into Premiere Pro. Where now, for example, if let's say we're on stage and you need to get a video of Will dancing, God, that's gonna go viral. And let's say you want to keep that going longer than the 10 seconds that I did it. You can now take clips inside of Premiere and stretch them, and it will literally stretch it out and make that clip longer.
Yeah, just like the Firefly idea of expanding out from the image, you'll be able to do the same things in videos and things like that.
Okay, so video is pretty straightforward and mind-blowing, but let's talk about something that's like uniquely really hard to do, and let's talk about audio. So I think we're ready with some clips to show.
Yeah,
so I think we got a video clip that has audio for us to play for everybody. So
over the internet, I cannot think of a more seamless way
skip
than
this,
Riverside
there's
to
an
do
ad.
it. The problem with recording in
you need to pay
It
for
was
it.
believable. I'm not paying for that.
So this is a YouTube creator that does a ton of podcasts. Writes, hey there, it's Pat Flynn, generate.
Hey there, it's Pat Flynn. I hope you're doing well today, and if you're watching this video, I'm probably being blown away at the moment. What? Hey, it's Pat here, and this is my real voice, but what you just heard was a clone that was made in just 5 minutes using a tool called 11 Labs. And man, this tech has gotten so good, and it's so scary. It was only a couple years ago I created a video about some other voice cloning tech, and it was very obvious to most of you that that was still an AI-generated voice. It still sounded a little robotic. It didn't have the right inflections. But this thing at its current state is almost indistinguishable with my real voice.
All right.
I asked
That's
ChatGPT
all we need to
to
show them.
write
That's
a poem
literally
about
it.
Philly cheesesteaks. I love Philly cheesesteaks. And I put it into 11
All right, we can
Labs
cut- yeah,
to
we can
read
cut
it
the audio
as
for the
me.
video.
And here are some incredible moments.
All right, so mind-blowing, 11 Labs is the name of the software that does this. You just have to give it a little bit of data, right? You could take this talk, feed it into it, and it would know our voices right back to each other, which is really absolutely fantastic. So first, this is scary, so this is why you should develop a safe code with everybody you know. So if you get a call asking for the bank password, you can verify someone's real. That's PSA. But let's talk about the events industry. Again, we're not getting into the ethics of this. So how would you use this?
I mentioned before, I had another one coming. This is another exact example of something we've used on site at events. Sometimes you kind of look around and you go, who's going to do the Voice of God announcements? And oftentimes it winds up being the AV person in the back, or someone from the client. And so we had folks on a show, and literally nobody wanted to do it. Nobody was comfortable doing it. The AV person on site wasn't comfortable doing it. The clients weren't comfortable doing it. They brought it into 11 Labs, created an artificial voice, typed out what they wanted all of the Voice of Gods to say, and it generated all of those, and they sounded perfectly natural, perfectly good. No one knew the difference whatsoever compared to a pre-recorded Voice of God that you could have done. So that was another one of those kind of mind-blowing, real-world experiences that I would not have thought of off the top of my head. But as soon as you hear it, you're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's great. So all those times that you pre-record the Voice of God announcements, that would be another person who, again, skirting the edge of maybe having your job replaced. But I have a feeling a good voiceover person is always going to be worth their weight in
That's
gold.
true. So that's called 11 Labs. Feel free to check it out if you want to see how to do voices. But another thing that we have to create a lot for events is music, right? And I remember it feels like 5 years, not even 5 years ago, during the pandemic, we're always like, how do we make sure that it's royalty-free music so we don't get sued? How do we make sure it's royalty-free so YouTube doesn't take it
us
down? So we have some examples on how to do that.
Yeah. So another service, this is called Suno, and it's got a very kind of chat GPT-like, interface where you go in. We were playing around with it before, but I think just to show you again how fast these things are, let's see, we're going to do an opera song about Will and Brandt doing a session at Event Tech Live.
Oh God.
About AI.
So
while that's going,
important to know, Suno gives you like a certain amount of credits, like it says 50 credits. Each of these songs is like 10 credits, but it renews every day. So basically you can create like 5 songs every day for free.
And this is another one of those ones where technically you should be on a paid plan in order to use it commercially. So, but the paid plan, it's pretty reasonable. It's like $8 a month or something.
Artificial melodies, it's ready to
they're
go.
up and ready. Okay, here we go.
All right, make sure you got volumes up, or you got audio in the back,
Volume is up.
ready to go. All right, here's
We're
some
gonna-
opera
yeah.
for you all.
Oh, it's got lyrics.
Wednesday afternoon, you get some opera.
In the spotlight, the stage is set.
This is the lyrics.
Will and Brandt, a soulful duet. At event, Tech Live, where
He
If
doesn't
you
know the word
struggle
live.
with Event Tech Live, we discovered that in our practices. It's Event Tech Live. So live.
by side. Voices as powerful
Okay, all
as
right.
thunder.
Let's check out the other one. It gives you 2 right away.
Their harmony
And okay, and again, that was like 15 seconds for it to generate this.
In one line of text. This one's a little
I'm
bit
turned
more
up all the way. I don't know if you got any more juice on that.
Where I think this is great is things like, for example, your walk-in music. Let's say, for example, you want to create a customized song for someone to walk on the stage for the video recap that you do at the end of the conference, right?
I will say the other person who might be on the edge of job loss is people who write cheeseball jazzy instrumentals for like dinner jazz and things like that, because this is another one of those ones that we just made in 2 seconds.
How many people had to find a place like this for a dinner?
Like sometimes this is all you need for dinner. Oh no, we don't have any dinner jazz. Hey, give me a minute and a half, I'll make some.
So that's music generation. I totally skipped past this really fast. I'm just going to go back to it because I know we're running out of time.
Yep.
But
15.
if you're looking to edit audio, a great tool for this is called Descript. It takes your audio, turns it into a Google Doc, and you literally just edit the Google Doc to edit your audio, and it automatically takes out ums and ahs and everything like that. In fact, it also similar to 11 Labs, you can put other words in. So for example, if I said, Brandt is a terrible person, I could replace the word terrible with Brandt is an awesome person. Really quick example of how you can do this. Descript is a great editing tool, also used for video too. All right, where are we going next with audio?
Pause. Do you have any questions?
Oh yeah, do you have any questions?
Oh,
Is there any more questions? Okay, do you create audio clips that sound like characters or aliens, for example?
you absolutely could. In fact, it'd probably be really good at that because a lot of what you're hearing in the opera and things like that is that uncanny valley where it's close, but there's something not quite right about it. And so I think for cartoon characters or aliens or things like that, it would be pretty darn good at that.
All right.
Somebody commented
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they write cheeseball jazz songs and that you'll never take their job.
That's great.
You'll never take my job away. I'm going to grab the mic.
And real quick, just because I know this is a topic of conversation for a lot of folks, this is never going to, I think there's always going to be a room for creatives. Like the creatives that I know in my life are embracing these tools. And, one of the guys that I work with, has an Emmy and, stuff like that. And he was really early on Photoshop. And people said the same thing when Photoshop, well, why take real pictures if they're just going to have to put it in Photoshop and edit it? So there's always room for the creatives. It's just whether or not they're using these tools to assist them in their jobs.
Okay, so as an event planner, one thing I know it can do, but what tool is a post-event report and data collection of all the information quickly, right? Instead of spending hours and hours after compiling all the data. So what would you recommend for something like that?
We'll come back to that one. Hold on to that. We're in generative. Wait until we get into summative.
Which is a word we totally
We
made up.
totally made that word up.
And there's even more better alternative words that we made up as well.
All right, got one last generative, and then we're going to go into summative. How many people have heard about VASA 1? This is last week. This is how fast this stuff's moving. Check this video out. This is generated from one picture. Oh,
Got it.
yeah, thank
Got
you. This is generated from one picture of each of these people with audio of their voices as well. You can't hear the audio of the voices, but this is Microsoft's new tool called VASA 1. Just Google it. You can go down that rabbit hole. But look how real that looks. This is done in real time. So what they're doing is literally typing out a script, and it's based off of one picture of her. So imagine you need someone to give a talk on a webinar, and you need their head in a box giving a talk about a webinar. How do you know they're real? What's great is you can even do it where, hey, let's say, for example, the question comes up. We could literally type it in and say, hey, answer this question, and it literally will answer it as an AI. This is insane. Real-time video generation. VASA 1.
And now, again, compare this to a year ago where we were at when this first started to cross our threshold. That's how fast this stuff is moving, and that's why it's not going to go away tomorrow. It's going to be. I was asked a little while ago, what's going to be the biggest thing in the next 18 months? And this. I mean, this AI is going to continue to dominate the story for the next year to 2 years.
All right, let's get into summative because you had a great question around that. So
that was all generative AI.
That's all generating new things.
Generating things.
So we figured if we had bonus time, we were going to get into some other side topics. Okay, so we talked about summative and creating summaries of things. This is also where AI is really great. Have you ever, for example, taken a podcast, for example, and you wanted to create a description that summarizes it like we did before? This is a great place for it. But imagine taking all of the content that happened at Event Tech Live. We took the summaries of every single stage, and we asked it, what was one trend that was mentioned more than anything else? I mean, AI, duh, but let's get a little bit more creative. What about AI? And you can ask the question to ChatGPT based on all those transcriptions to now then create highlight reels of your conferences.
Give me a list of all the tools that were mentioned, all the AI tools that were mentioned at Event Tech Live this week.
Imagine, for example, you have an RFP that's 30 pages long. And you
Imagine.
don't really have time to read it because you're busy answering 5 other RFPs. You could take that RFP, plug it in, and say, what are the organization's top goals? Take their website, their recent stock announcement. Plug that in and say, hey, how can I help them achieve their organizational goals? This is all possible with summative stuff.
So we literally did that. We had a 46-page RFP from a client. We went and did the client meeting first, just to be clear on that. We did the pitch, did everything, asked them what their concerns were about moving to a different provider. Around about the same time, we were experimenting with this stuff. So we fed the entire 46-page RFP into ChatGPT and asked it, what are this client's main concerns about moving to a new provider? They were exactly the same. The first 3 questions they asked out of the gate were the first 3 questions the ChatGPT generated.
All right, less a comment, but more example, used it to summarize all written survey feedback.
Yep.
12,222 words. The insights were incredible. Yeah, so that's a great example too, is you're getting all the survey feedback. How do you know what's important without just reading every single one and then using your brain to process what the trends are? Super powerful.
Yep. So using these tools, one of the things they're very, very good at is summarizing things and summarizing data. And you can't think back to that podcast example. That's basically what it's doing, right? I'm feeding it the transcript of the podcast. It's summarizing it, pulling out 4 bullet points, and done.
So just as we don't have a ton of time, we have a couple more bullet points we want to get to and get towards data. And I have a couple examples, but it's going to take too long to show, so I'll just explain it to you. So this is next into the area what we're calling admirative AI.
So generative,
Summative,
and admirative.
So this are all as admin tasks. So for example, how many people have ever had like 2 spreadsheets and you need to like find the information in common and combine them? Oh my God. How much time does that take? Like an hour, right? You're lucky if the columns all match up. Try this with ChatGPT. Take 2 spreadsheets, upload them, and say, I need you to find the sets of data that they have in common. It can do that. I did it literally last week. I do this all the time. I also use this for filtering through data too. So we're talking about like how do you process the data, but this is very, very simple. Let's say, for example, I give a huge amount of data in terms of the questions that are coming in from our talk, all the talks across ETL. And I say, bring up all the questions that were brought up around AI, and then turn those questions into a blog post. Again, then taking that admirative to filter the information and then generating with it. Hopefully you get your minds racing. Data analysis though, should we get into it?
Yeah.
I love data, so we're about to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So
I'll try and keep you from.
this is an area that I think AI is gonna get better at, and I think it has huge potential for the event technology space. I don't think there's a lot of tools that are doing it perfect quite yet, but try just taking a raw amount of data that you have from that conference, just upload it into ChatGPT, and ask it, what trends do you see? So for those who don't know, Click is like a way to track attendees where they are in the venue. It gives you a large amount of raw data. I do this all the time. I take customers' information to really understand exactly what are the big things happening, and I say, what are the trends? And then I can explain to the customer what trends of raw data. So for example, did you know that most attendees, when walking in, the first place that they're gonna go to is a session? They're not walking to a booth to connect. They're not usually meeting with each other. They're usually just, I gotta get back to that talk. You could use that data that you have about your event using live location data and feed it into a system to find that trend for you. Super easy to do. Just, you can use it with ChatGPT Plus. Yeah.
Yeah, I've even talked about it to people at this show who like thought they, they thought they were going to have a good position, but then once they got here and realized where everything was, they're like, oh yeah, maybe they just kind of walked by us, that kind of thing. So being able to analyze that data and truly know, and be able to show, like if you're an expo provider, and be able to say, look, here's the data that shows these are the hot spots on the floor. Yeah, there's a value to being the first one in the door, but maybe you might want to consider these other ones, and then you can charge more for those.
Money,
right?
money.
So there's a lot of, when you're able to actually back up what you're saying with data as opposed to, well, I think it's a good spot. Seems like a good spot.
All right, so going down the rabbit hole. So yeah, just try taking raw data, plug it on in, you'll be really surprised. But the important thing is that you need to get that raw data too. So if you only have survey data, your approach is gonna get survey summarization. But if you get the raw data, that's where the power is. So I wanna see if I can provide an example of this, and hopefully my taskbar comes back. It is really not liking me. Let's try to do this.
Yep, 5
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. I'll use this as an example. So, let's see if I can make this nice
Yep.
and big for everybody.
There you go.
All right, so we wanted to give like a couple more tips and tricks that didn't really fit anywhere. So I want to share 2 tools that I'm using right now to show you the power of AI. So how many people here use Gmail as their main email Outlook? So I use this thing called Superhuman that overlays over Gmail. It's basically like an email client. You pay $20 a month for it. One of the favorite features is that it can summarize emails in the top of the email. You ever had that like long email thread when you got back from vacation? You're like, what they even talk about? You have to like read every single email, what's going on. Now you can summarize it very easily. This is like a 3 email thing, but Perry introduces Will. Courtney asked if we have a booth at ETL. Will confirms we have a booth and invites Courtney to stop by. Thanks for stopping by, Courtney, by the way. What's also really cool is I can use this to generate AI too. So for example, I come here to AI and I say, write a response. I'm gonna give it really, really generic instructions. And what it does is it looked through all of my emails I've ever sent and knows how I write, and it wrote a response.
It's also confidently wrong.
It's also confidently wrong.
We do not have a booth.
We do not have a booth any. But I could say, let's do this. Let's improve it. So let's say retry. Well, that's gonna just do another one. Let's click AI again. Say respond and say yes, we do.
There we go.
And you know, again, this is like a very simple email thread. We do have a booth at ETL. We'll stop by anytime tomorrow. And then it gave like a generic number it thought I had. Again, hallucination. But Superhuman is what's called superhuman.com. Highly recommend it for answering emails. I got one last example, and then I think we'll have time for like one question. So let's.
Yeah, we got one.
Okay, great.
And
All right,
it's
hit
on
me
us.
while we go.
Security
Like this one?
concerns.
Yeah.
You're pushing all this information out. How are you going to maintain it?
That's
keep
one of my
it
favorite
confidential.
It's one of my favorite questions. These things know nothing. That's what we have to overcome. There is no master database that has all of this information in it. It is spicy autocorrect, right? It is literally a word. These LLMs, large language models, are predictive language models. Now, if you have a very specific set of words, like 7 years ago, right? It's only going to have heard that once, and it knows that order. So if you type in fourscore, but if I say thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening, you say Galileo, right? It's just a prediction engine. You don't have to have that whole song downloaded and memorized in your head. So I want to be really clear about that. There is not a giant database that this thing is searching. All it's doing is predicting the next most common word based on what you fed it. So now, does that mean you should not care at all and give it all of your company's proprietary information? Absolutely not. Because
Unless you're on their enterprise
if
plan.
it's a very specific, well, yes, they have. If you're paying for it, then you can lock things down and do private GPTs like we were talking about before. But especially if you're using the free tools, you know they're training the data based on the information that's being fed into the free tools. So depending on how specific that language is, it's going to be more likely to be fed back in exactly that form. The New York Times thing that came out where they're like, hey, you gave us this, it gave us our whole article word for word. The way that they got it to feed them that information was by giving it the first 4 paragraphs of the article, and then it gave them the 5th. No one's reading the New York Times that way, right? The New York Times wasn't in that. It just goes, oh, that's what you want me to do. I predict you want this 5th paragraph that comes from it. So I just want to be really clear about that. It's not a database of information. It is literally what is the next most likely word that I'm supposed to come up with.
All right, I got one last cool thing to think about, and then we're going to send you on your way. We now know how to use generative AI for text. Now think about all the times attendees email you with questions about your conference. Hey, are there going to be bathrooms? Is there an ADA ramp? Think of whatever email you've ever gotten from an attendee. There are now tools that will auto-respond to them with all the knowledge that you have and about your event, and be able to serve up and email them back instantaneously via the channel of email. So start thinking about those sort of ways that you can start saving yourself time. So I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
I can't believe we got done in 45 minutes. Woo. If you have any questions, we're going to be around all week. So come find us. We're happy to chat with you. And thank you guys so much for coming in and enjoying our talk. Anything else?
No, let's do it. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys so
That
much.
was great. Great session. Our next session will be at 2 o'clock about tech stacks and making them all work together seamlessly. That'll be at 2 o'clock.